Now, for many people, one of the joys of owning their own home is the fact that you can pretty much do what you want with it. But for the owners of well over 2 million leasehold properties throughout England and Wales, that isn't necessarily the case. Owning a leasehold flat means that even though you can pay tens or even hundreds of thousands of pounds for your property, you have only really bought the right to live there. The person who owns the building, the landlord or the freeholder, has the lion's share of the power. The government has been promising a radical overhaul of the leasehold system, and Sarah Pennells went to Hove near Brighton to find out what it may mean for leaseholders.
Shula is an expert in leasehold law, not through choice, but because several years ago she and the others living in her block of flats were faced with £1 million bill for repairs. Even divided between all the flats, it worked out at over £20,000 per resident. Eventually they had to pay, but they also managed to buy out the landlord. Now they collectively own and run the block, which Shula says has made a huge difference.
It means knowing when the next penny is going to be demanded, and knowing that we have a measure of control, self-government, and we are in charge of our own situation, and that makes so much difference, having suffered before. In addition, we know that things are well run.
Brighton, like much of the south coast of England, has thousands of leasehold flats. And although there are many leaseholders in England and Wales who don't have problems, those that do say there are two main weaknesses in the current system. Firstly, that it can be expensive to buy out a landlord who doesn't want to sell. And secondly, although the landlord only invests a fraction of the amount that the flat owners do, they have most of the power. Even though Shula and the other flat owners now own this block and can decide how it's maintained, they're still part of the leasehold system. Leaseholders have been given more rights over the last few years, but many flat owners living in blocks like these feel that now is the time for major change. There have already been several reforms. In 1987, leaseholders in flats were given the right to buy out a landlord who wanted to sell. 6 years later, leaseholders could collectively force the landlord to sell them the freehold. And in 1996, leaseholders could avoid potentially costly court action if they were disputing service charges by going to a low-cost tribunal. However, it hasn't meant an end to the problems. This advice service receives thousands of calls a year, mainly from flat owners who think their landlord is charging too much. But there is optimism that government reforms will make a difference, both by making it easier to buy out the landlord and by giving leaseholders a right to manage their block.
The principal change is going to be the transfer of power. By providing leaseholders with the right to manage their own buildings, it'll provide them with a power commensurate to the equity, the value they hold of the building. That will cut out 90% of the problems overnight. Once leaseholders have the right to run the buildings themselves, they are no longer in danger of being exploited by a bad landlord or suffering an incompetent landlord.